His hands glowed neon green under the restaurant's dim lighting, like he dipped them in radioactive paint. Lucas froze, staring at his fingers in horror while my daughter gasped beside him. What he saw there changed everything. And me? I just smiled across the table, knowing my 30 years as a forensic locksmith had finally paid off in the most spectacular way possible. But before we get to that beautiful moment, let me tell you how we got here. My neighbors knew me as the quiet retired woman who spent her days tending roses in suburban Ohio. They'd wave from their driveways, compliment my garden, and probably think I was just another harmless grandmother, filling her empty hours with dirt and petals. That was fine by me. I'd learned long ago that being underestimated was the best camouflage a woman could wear. The truth was more interesting. For 3 decades, I'd been a master certified forensic locksmith for Titanium Security Solutions, one of the country's top private security firms. I didn't just open safes. I designed them, tested them, found their weaknesses, and taught others how to protect against people who thought they were clever enough to crack them. My daughter Chloe knew some of this, but not the details. After her father died 5 years ago, she'd worried I was lonely. She didn't understand that solitude and loneliness were different things. I had my roses, my books, and my peace. Then she married Lucas. Lucas was everything you'd expect from a man climbing the corporate finance ladder. Sharp suits, sharper smile, handshake firm enough to project confidence, but not so strong as to seem desperate. He called me Eleanor with just the right amount of warmth, brought wine to dinner, and complimented my cooking with practiced enthusiasm. But I'd spent decades reading people who lied for a living. Lucas's eyes never quite matched his smile. When he looked around my modest home, I could see him calculating, assessing, measuring value. He touched things with the careful attention of someone cataloging inventory. "Beautiful place you have here," he'd said at their engagement dinner, running his fingers along my antique sideboard. "Must be worth quite a bit." "It's just a house," I'd replied. "Still, property values in this area have skyrocketed. You're sitting on a gold mine." Chloe had laughed, squeezing his arm. "Lucas is always thinking about investments." I'd smiled and poured more wine, but something cold had settled in my stomach. Lucas wasn't admiring my home. He was appraising it. The first real warning came 6 months into their marriage. Lucas started asking questions about my finances with the casual persistence of someone conducting reconnaissance. Did I have a good financial advisor? Had I considered moving my retirement funds into higher yield accounts? What kind of security did I have for important documents? "Just looking out for you," he'd say, flashing that practiced smile. "Chloe would kill me if anything happened to your nest egg." I'd deflect politely, but I noticed other things too. He'd disappear during visits, claiming bathroom trips that lasted 15 minutes. He'd study the layout of my house like he was memorizing blueprints. Once, I found him in my spare room, standing very still, just looking around. "Lost?" I'd asked from the doorway. He'd jumped slightly, "Just admiring the antiques." "You have excellent taste." The spare room held my old wall safe behind a framed botanical print. It was deliberately antiquated looking, the kind of safe that screamed easy target to someone who didn't know better. But I'd installed it myself, with modifications only I understood. Lucas had been staring right at that wall. The safe looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, an old, slightly dusty relic from another era. The brass combination dial had a satisfying weight to it. and the door was thick enough to feel secure without being obviously modern. Most people would see it and think their grandmother's jewelry box, not serious security. Inside, I kept $80,000 in emergency cash, a legacy from my cautious nature and my years in security. It wasn't my only savings, but it was substantial enough to attract attention if someone knew it existed. The safe had one obvious combination lock and two hidden fail-safes that I'd engineered myself. But those were backup plans. What mattered now was that someone had been studying it carefully. I knew this because of the door knocker. The spare room door had an antique brass knocker I'd inherited from my mother. It hung at a precise 90-degree angle, perfectly vertical. I'd adjusted it 1,000 times over the years, unable to tolerate even the slightest deviation. Last Tuesday, when I returned from the community center, it was off by 2 degrees. Someone had been in that room. I made tea with steady hands, the ritual automatic after decades of practice. The kettle whistled. I poured. Added honey. Stirred exactly 3 times. My mind was already working through possibilities, calculating probabilities, designing responses. Only 3 people had keys to my house. Me, Chloe, and Lucas. Chloe was at work Tuesday afternoons, teaching 2nd grade across town. That left Lucas, who'd claimed a flexible work-from-home schedule lately. How convenient. I carried my tea to the spare room and stood in the doorway for a long moment, just observing. Everything looked normal. The framed botanical print hung straight. The antique dresser stood undisturbed. But I could feel the violation like a handprint on clean glass. I opened the safe, using the combination I'd never shared with anyone. Inside, everything appeared untouched. But I'd been a forensic locksmith long enough to know that appeared was the operative word. The cash was stacked in exact bundles, secured with paper bands. I lifted the top bundle carefully and held it to the light. The bills were slightly looser than I'd left them, the paper band repositioned by perhaps a millimeter. Someone had handled this money. Recently. I closed the safe and sat in the armchair by the window, thinking. Lucas had done a practice run. He'd entered my home while I was gone, opened the safe using a combination he'd somehow acquired, and examined the contents. He hadn't taken anything yet, which meant he was planning something bigger. Smart, in a way. Test the waters first, confirm the target, minimize risk, but not smart enough. He'd forgotten to check the door knocker, that tiny detail that betrayed his presence. My phone buzzed, a text from Chloe. Lucas and I are coming for dinner Friday. Can't wait to see you, Mom. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling something cold and heavy settle in my chest. My daughter loved this man. She'd chosen him, built a life with him, trusted him completely. And he was preparing to rob her mother. The betrayal was personal, yes, but it was also strategic. Lucas had married into my family, earned our trust, and now planned to exploit that access. This wasn't just theft. It was calculated predation. I texted back, "Wonderful, sweetheart. I'll make your favorite." Then I made a different call. Frank answered on the second ring. "Eleanor? Been a while. I need package Delta 7. Silence. Then, the ghostly marker? That's serious equipment. What's going on? Frank had been my colleague at Titanium Security for 20 years before we both retired. He now ran a specialty security supply house, the kind that catered to paranoid millionaires and government agencies. We'd stayed friends, bonded by decades of shared expertise. "Family matter?" I said carefully. "Someone's testing my defenses." "Say no more. I'll have it couriered tomorrow. Same protocols? Unmarked package, signature required, daytime delivery only. Done. Eleanor? His voice softened. Be careful. That stuff is permanent. I'm counting on it. After we hung up, I sat in my garden among the roses, thinking through every step. Lucas wanted to play games with a security expert? Fine. But he'd chosen the wrong grandmother to underestimate. The UV marking powder was forensic grade, used by cash transport companies and federal agencies. Invisible, odorless, and impossible to wash off without specialized solvents. Under normal light, it was undetectable. Under ultraviolet light, it glowed like neon fire. Lucas would steal from me. I'd let him. But he'd carry the evidence on his skin like a scarlet letter, visible to anyone who knew where to look. The package arrived Wednesday afternoon, exactly as promised. Brown paper wrapping, no return address, requiring my signature. Inside was a small metal cylinder about the size of a pill bottle, sealed with tamper-evident tape. I carried it to my workshop in the basement, the space I'd maintained for years to keep my skills sharp. Lock picks hung on pegboards. Safe diagrams covered one wall. A workbench held precision tools most people wouldn't recognize. I opened the cylinder carefully, exposing the fine powder inside. It looked like talcum, innocent and harmless, but I knew its power. 1 gram could mark a thief for weeks. The challenge was application. I needed Lucas to handle it directly, transfer it to his skin and clothes without realizing what had happened. The powder needed to be on something he'd want to steal, something valuable enough to make him careless. The answer was obvious. The cash itself. I spent 2 hours preparing the bait with surgical precision. I removed the real money from the safe and replaced it with cut printer paper and matching bundles. Then I coated each bundle with a thin layer of the UV powder, using a soft brush to ensure even coverage. The powder adhered perfectly, invisible even to my trained eye. Next came the trigger mechanism. The powder needed to transfer when Lucas opened the package, but also needed to spread in a way that would mark him thoroughly. I remembered a technique from my training, the burst dispersion method. I placed the coated bundles inside a clear plastic sleeve, then added a light dusting of powder between the layers. When the sleeve was opened, even gently, the friction would create a tiny aerosol cloud that would settle on hands, clothes, and face. The beauty was its invisibility. Lucas would see nothing, feel nothing, suspect nothing. He'd believe he'd gotten away clean. I sealed the package with pressure-sensitive adhesive tape that would tear at the slightest pull, guaranteeing the powder would deploy. Then I placed it carefully in the safe, positioning it exactly where the real money had been. The trap was set. Now I needed to bait it properly. But first, I needed documentation. Evidence that would be undeniable even to Chloe, who loved her husband and trusted him completely. This couldn't be my word against his. It needed to be absolute. I went shopping for surveillance equipment. The camera was disguised as a vintage tabletop radio, the kind you'd find in any grandmother's spare room. It had high-definition video recording, night vision capability, and could stream directly to my phone. Perfect camouflage, perfect function. I positioned it on the dresser, angled to capture the safe and anyone approaching it. The view on my phone was crystal clear, the entire room visible. The safe's combination dial in sharp focus. I spent an hour testing angles, adjusting position, confirming that nothing looked out of place. The radio blended perfectly with my other antiques, just another piece of nostalgic decoration. Then I tested the audio. Excellent clarity, sensitive enough to pick up breathing and whispered conversations. If Lucas said anything incriminating, I'd have it recorded. The surveillance system would timestamp everything, creating an undeniable record of exactly when Lucas entered my spare room and exactly what he did there. I made one final adjustment, ensuring the camera would activate on motion detection. Battery life was good for 72 hours of standby, more than enough time. Everything was ready. Now I just needed Lucas to take the bait. I called Chloe Thursday evening, keeping my voice casual and warm. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you?" "Tired but good. Second graders have infinite energy." "I can imagine." I paused, as if the next thought had just occurred to me. "Oh, I wanted to mention something. I sold some of those old tech stocks your father bought years ago. Finally got around to it." "That's great, Mom. Were they worth much?" "More than I expected. 25,000. The bank gave me a draft, but it was too late to deposit today. I'll have to wait until tomorrow." Silence. Then, "You're keeping $25,000 in the house overnight?" "Just in the safe, dear. It's perfectly secure. Nothing to worry about." "Are you sure? That's a lot of money. I've kept more than that in there for years. It's fine." Another pause. Perfectly timed. "Though I am feeling rather rough tonight. I think I'm coming down with something. Might take a heavy sleeping pill and turn in early." I could almost hear Chloe's concern through the phone. "Mom, do you want me to come over?" No. I just need rest. I'll be fine by tomorrow." We talked a few more minutes, then said goodbye. I knew Chloe would mention this conversation to Lucas, the large sum of cash stored overnight. Me, heavily medicated and deeply asleep. It was irresistible bait. I took my phone to bed and watched the surveillance feed, waiting. At 11:47 p.m., the motion sensor activated. My phone screen lit up with a clear image of my spare room, now visible in night vision green. The door opened slowly, carefully, and Lucas slipped inside. Even through the camera, I could see his expression. Nervous excitement, the look of someone who thinks they're pulling off the perfect crime. He wore dark clothes and thin gloves, amateur hour precautions that wouldn't help him. He moved directly to the safe. No hesitation. He knew exactly where it was, exactly what he was doing. The combination dial spun under his fingers. Right, left, right, left. He'd learned the sequence somehow, probably watching me open it during one of his reconnaissance visits. The safe door swung open. Lucas reached inside and pulled out the package of cash. For a moment, he just stared at it, probably calculating what $25,000 added to whatever else was in there would mean for his debts. Then he opened the plastic sleeve. The camera captured everything. The slight tear of the adhesive, the invisible powder puffing out in a tiny cloud, Lucas handling the bundles to confirm they were real. He smiled, actually smiled, as the UV dye coated his hands, his shirt cuffs, his face where he'd unconsciously touched it. He saw nothing wrong, felt nothing suspicious, just pocketed the package and closed the safe carefully, exactly as he'd found it. Lucas left my house at 12:03 a.m., moving like a shadow through my home. I watched him on camera until the front door closed. Then I got up and checked the spare room myself. Everything looked normal. The safe was closed, the room undisturbed. But the invisible powder had done its work. I could see traces of it on the doorknob, the safe handle, the edge of the dresser where Lucas had steadied himself. Under normal light, nothing. Under my small UV flashlight, glowing neon green handprints everywhere. Perfect. I made tea and sat in my kitchen, reviewing the surveillance footage on my phone. Every moment was captured in perfect detail. Lucas entering, opening the safe, handling the money, contaminating himself with the marking powder. The audio had picked up his breathing, the small satisfied sound he'd made when he confirmed the cash was real. It had even caught him whispering to himself, 80 grand total. That'll cover everything. 80 grand. He'd known exactly how much was in my safe. He'd been planning this for a while, watching, calculating, waiting for the perfect opportunity. The betrayal stung, but the evidence was beautiful, clear, undeniable, perfect. Now came the most important part, the public exposure. Friday morning, I called Chloe before she left for work. Hi, sweetheart. I'm feeling much better today. Oh, good. I was worried about you. How'd you sleep? Like a rock. That sleeping pill knocked me out completely. I paused. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Your birthday's coming up in 2 weeks. Mom, you don't have to. I want to take you and Lucas to dinner. Somewhere really nice. You picked the place. I could hear the smile in her voice. Really? That would be amazing. Lucas has been talking about this new place downtown, Eclipse. Super exclusive, hard to get reservations. Then Eclipse it is. Can you book it for tomorrow night? I know it's short notice, but I feel like celebrating. Tomorrow? Are you sure? Absolutely. My treat. 7 o'clock? After we hung up, I researched Eclipse Restaurant. It was perfect. Upscale, dimly lit, designed with trendy ultraviolet accent lighting for ambiance. The kind of place where black lights were part of the aesthetic. Lucas would walk in thinking he'd gotten away with theft. He'd walk out glowing like a radioactive beacon. I spent the rest of the day preparing, choosing my outfit carefully. I needed to look grandmother sweet, harmless, unsuspecting. A light cardigan, sensible shoes, my small elegant clutch purse. Inside the purse, my high-powered UV inspection flashlight, professional grade, the kind used for crime scene investigation. Saturday evening arrived with perfect clarity. I dressed carefully, checking my appearance in the mirror. I looked exactly like what Lucas expected, a sweet, naive grandmother, probably still fuzzy from last night's sleeping pill, certainly oblivious to his midnight theft. The UV flashlight fit perfectly in my clutch, hidden beneath tissues and reading glasses. I'd practiced the reveal a dozen times, ensuring smooth deployment. My phone held the surveillance footage, backed up to cloud storage and a USB drive hidden in my bedroom. If Lucas somehow destroyed my phone, I had copies. If he tried to gaslight Chloe or claim I was confused, I had proof. But the powder was the masterstroke. Physical evidence was harder to deny than video, harder to explain away. Lucas had walked out of my house marked, branded, carrying the proof of his crime on his own skin. I arrived at Eclipse 10 minutes early. The restaurant was everything I'd hoped. Sophisticated, dimly lit, with strategic ultraviolet strip lighting along the walls and ceiling for artistic effect. Under normal circumstances, the UV lights were subtle, just enough to make white fabrics and certain drinks glow softly. Under the right circumstances, they'd reveal so much more. Chloe and Lucas arrived exactly on time. My daughter looked beautiful in a navy dress, her face bright with happiness. Lucas wore an expensive suit, crisp white shirt, confident smile. He looked like success personified. Eleanor. He hugged me, and I noticed his hands, clean looking under normal light, seemingly innocent. So generous of you to host this dinner. My pleasure. You only turned 30 once, Chloe. We settled at our table, positioned perfectly near one of the UV accent lights. Lucas sat directly across from me, Chloe between us. The waiter brought menus and water, and I noticed Lucas seemed unusually relaxed, almost euphoric. Of course he did. He thought he was $80,000 richer, and that I was completely clueless about it. "This place is incredible," Chloe said, looking around at the sleek decor. "Only the best for my daughter." I opened my menu, pretending to squint at the small print. Oh dear, the lighting is so dim in here. I can barely read this. "Here, Mom." Chloe pulled out her phone flashlight. No, I have something better." I reached into my clutch purse, fingers closing around the UV flashlight. My friend gave me this neat little gadget. It's very bright. I pulled out the flashlight and set it on the table, innocuous as a pen. Lucas glanced at it without interest. He had no idea what was coming. "Lucas, dear, would you mind?" I pushed the UV flashlight toward him. My hands are a bit shaky tonight. "Could you turn it on and shine it at my menu?" "Of course." He picked up the flashlight casually, examining it briefly. "Interesting light. Very small. It's powerful, though." "Just click the button on the end." Lucas pressed the button. The UV beam, invisible to him in the dim restaurant, activated instantly. He aimed it at my menu, trying to be helpful. Then he moved his other hand into the beam to adjust the angle. His fingers lit up like they'd been dipped in highlighter ink. Neon green, vivid and unmistakable, coating his skin from fingernails to wrist. The powder had transferred completely during his theft, settling into every crease and pore. Lucas froze. His eyes widened as he stared at his glowing hand, the color so bright it was visible even in the restaurant's ambient lighting. "What?" His voice came out strangled. "Keep the light steady," I said calmly. "I need to read the menu." But Lucas wasn't listening. He was staring at his hands in horror, watching the neon evidence of his crime blaze under the UV beam. "What is this?" Lucas dropped the flashlight, which rolled across the table, its beam sweeping across his shirt cuffs, his collar, his face. Everywhere it touched revealed the same thing: brilliant neon green streaks and handprints, the UV powder marking him like a fingerprint at a crime scene. "Lucas?" Chloe leaned forward, confused. "What's wrong with your hands?" "Nothing. It's some kind of prank." He grabbed his napkin, frantically wiping at the glowing marks. But UV powder doesn't wipe off. If anything, his rubbing just spread it further, transferring it to the white napkin, which began to glow under the ambient UV lighting. I picked up the flashlight calmly and shined it directly at his face. His cheeks, his forehead, even his hairline glowed where he touched himself after handling the contaminated money. He looked like he'd been painted with radioactive makeup. "Mom, what's happening?" Chloe's voice carried an edge of fear. "That, sweetheart," I said quietly, "is what happens when someone steals from their own family." Lucas's face went from shock to rage in an instant. "This is insane. You did this. You're trying to frame me." "Frame you?" I kept my voice level, reasonable. "For what exactly, Lucas?" You know what I mean." Lucas was breathing hard now, his composure completely shattered. The other diners were starting to notice the commotion, the glowing man arguing with two women. "Mom, I don't understand." Chloe looked between us, her face pale. "What is Lucas talking about?" I pulled out my phone, opening the video app. "Sweetheart, I need you to watch something. It's going to be difficult." "Don't you dare!" Lucas lunged for my phone, but Chloe caught his wrist. "Let her show me." Her voice was steel now, the protective teacher tone she used with misbehaving students. I pressed play. The surveillance footage appeared on screen, clear and undeniable. Lucas entering my spare room at 11:47 p.m., opening my safe, stealing the package of money. The timestamp was visible. His face was visible. Every action was documented in perfect detail. Chloe watched in silence, her expression changing from confusion to horror to something colder and harder. When the video ended, she looked at Lucas with eyes I'd never seen on my daughter before. "You robbed my mother." "It's not what it looks like." "You broke into her house while she slept and stole from her." "I needed the gambling debts." The words tumbled out before Lucas could stop them, and I saw the exact moment Chloe's world collapsed. Gambling debts? Lucas seemed to realize his mistake, but it was too late. The confession had already escaped. "I can explain everything. There was this crypto opportunity, and how much?" Chloe's voice was quiet, dangerous. "It doesn't matter now." "How much, Lucas?" He deflated, the last of his confidence evaporating. 80,000? Chloe looked at him like he was a stranger. Around us, the restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners openly watching the drama unfold. Lucas still glowed under the UV lighting, a walking advertisement of his guilt. "You owe $80,000 in gambling debts," Chloe said slowly, "and instead of telling me, instead of asking for help, you decided to rob my mother. I was protecting you. I didn't want you to worry." "Protecting me?" Chloe's voice rose. "You married me, moved into my life, got close to my family, all so you could steal from us?" "No, I love you. The debts came later, after you'd already assessed my mother's house like a target," I interjected quietly. "After you'd spent months learning her routines, finding the safe, watching her combination." Lucas's silence was answer enough. "The powder you're covered in," I continued, "is industrial-grade UV marking dye. It's used by security companies to track stolen money. I coded the cash you stole with it 2 nights ago." Lucas looked down at his still glowing hands, comprehension dawning. "You knew." "You knew I knew you'd been practicing," I said. "You searched my safe 2 weeks ago while I was at the community center. You disturbed my door knocker by 2 degrees. I noticed." "A door knocker?" Lucas laughed, but it sounded broken. "This whole thing is because of a door knocker? This whole thing is because you're a thief who underestimated a woman you thought was weak and stupid." I leaned forward. "I spent 30 years as a forensic locksmith, Lucas. I designed security systems for banks and government agencies. That safe you opened so easily, I built it. Those combination numbers you learned, I let you watch me use them." Chloe was staring at me now. "You're a locksmith." "Was. Retired 5 years ago. But I never forgot how to catch people who think they're clever." I looked at Lucas. "The money you stole?" "Cut paper. The real cash is still locked up safely, along with evidence of every time you searched my house." Lucas stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. "I'm not listening to this anymore." "You're both crazy." "Sit down," Chloe said coldly. "I don't have to." "Sit down." Something in Chloe's voice made Lucas sink back into his chair. His hands were shaking now, still glowing under every UV light in the restaurant. "That powder," I said conversationally, "is semi-permanent. It's designed to mark bank robbers so they can be identified hours or even days after a crime. It doesn't wash off with soap or water. You'll need specialized solvents, and even then, traces will remain in your skin, creases for weeks." Lucas looked at his hands in horror. "You can't do this to me." "I didn't do anything," I corrected. "You did this to yourself when you decided to rob your wife's mother." The people I owe money to. They're not patient. They're going to. He stopped, realizing he was digging himself deeper. Going to what? Chloe asked. Hurt you? And you thought stealing from my elderly mother was the solution? I was desperate. You were selfish. Chloe stood, her movements precise and controlled. You lied to me about your job, about our finances, about your debts. You targeted my family. You planned to take money from the woman who raised me, who welcomed you into her home, who trusted you. Chloe, please, I want a divorce. The words rang out clear and final in the quiet restaurant. I want you out of our apartment tonight. I want you out of my life completely. Lucas's face crumpled. You can't mean that. I absolutely mean that. Lucas tried one last desperate gambit. She's the criminal here. She set a trap. She poisoned me. The powder is non-toxic, I said calmly. FDA approved for food handling environments. Perfectly safe, just very visible under UV light. And I didn't trap you, Lucas. I simply made it easier for you to reveal your true nature. You'll never prove anything. I'll tell everyone you're senile, that you imagined. I pulled out my phone again. The surveillance footage is time-stamped and backed up to 3 separate locations. The audio recording includes you saying, and I quote, 80 grand total. That'll cover everything. Want to hear it? Lucas went silent. The UV powder is on your skin, in your clothes, probably in your car by now where you touched the steering wheel, I continued. Any forensic examination will show it came from handling marked bills. And the bills you stole, the fake ones, those are in your possession, also marked, also traceable. You planned this. He looked at me with something approaching respect, mixed with hatred. You knew exactly what I'd do. I knew you'd be predictable. Desperate men usually are. I gathered my clutch, standing gracefully. Chloe, sweetheart, I think we should leave. We can get dinner somewhere else. Chloe nodded, not looking at Lucas. Mom, I'm so sorry. I brought him into your life. I should have. You loved him, I said gently. That's not a crime. His choices are his responsibility, not yours. We walked toward the restaurant exit, leaving Lucas sitting alone at the table, still glowing under the UV lights, a spectacular beacon of his own betrayal. In the parking lot, Chloe broke down crying. I held her while she sobbed, my strong, brave daughter grieving the loss of her marriage and her trust in one devastating moment. I loved him, she whispered. I really loved him. I know, sweetheart. I know. How could I not see what he was? Because he was good at hiding it. And because you trusted him, as you should have been able to trust your husband. I pulled back, looking at her seriously. This isn't your fault. You understand that, right? He married me to rob you. He married you because you're wonderful. The robbery came later, when his debts became overwhelming. It doesn't make it right, but you need to understand, his crime isn't your failure. We sat in my car for a long time, Chloe crying while I held her hand. Finally, she wiped her eyes and looked at me with red-rimmed but determined expression. I can't go back to the apartment tonight. You'll stay with me. We'll get your things tomorrow when he's gone. What if he's not gone? Then we'll call the police and show them the surveillance footage. Breaking and entering. Theft. Fraud. Lucas has more immediate problems than stubbornness. Chloe managed a weak smile. You're kind of scary when you're protective, Mom. I'm a mother. It's in the job description. 2 weeks later, I stood in my garden, pruning roses in the early morning sunlight. The spare room safe held my real money again, secured properly. The surveillance equipment was still in place, though I doubted I'd need it again. Chloe had moved back into her childhood bedroom temporarily, taking a leave from teaching to sort out the divorce. Lucas had left the apartment without argument, probably afraid we'd press criminal charges. He disappeared somewhere, still glowing under every UV light he encountered, carrying the mark of his crime on his skin. The powder would fade eventually, given enough time and specialized treatment. But I'd made sure Lucas understood that every bank, every security checkpoint, every nightclub with black lights would reveal what he'd done. His face and hands would glow green for weeks, marking him as clearly as any scarlet letter. Mom? Chloe appeared on the porch, carrying coffee mugs. Brought you some fuel. Thank you, sweetheart. I accepted the mug gratefully. I talked to a lawyer yesterday. He says Lucas will have to claim his gambling debts in the divorce proceedings. Good. That means they're legally his problem, not yours. Yeah. Chloe sipped her coffee, looking at the roses. I've been thinking about what you said. About not blaming myself. And you're right. I trusted someone I should have been able to trust. The fact that he betrayed that trust doesn't mean I was wrong to give it. I squeezed her hand. Exactly. But I'm also thinking about taking a self-defense class. And maybe a basic security course. I don't ever want to be that vulnerable again. Those sound like excellent ideas. We stood together in the morning sun, among the roses I tended for so many years. My daughter was hurting, but she was strong. She'd rebuild, recover, and eventually trust again. That was the nature of resilience. As for Lucas, he'd learned an expensive lesson about underestimating quiet women who tend gardens. Some mistakes glow brighter than others, and his would follow him for a long time. I smiled, sipping my coffee, and returned to pruning my roses. Sometimes justice came from courtrooms and police. Sometimes it came from knowing exactly how to mark a thief so the whole world could see his true colors. And sometimes justice glowed neon green.